Hello, everybody. Okay, so this is really exciting because this is the very first time I'm going live on my Paleo Parents website, Kathy. Can you believe it?
Awesome. That's great.
I know. So I felt like, I've had a lot of people joining lately, a lot of, similar issues and questions going on over there. And it's just the group is growing and getting great. So I really wanted to do this. And also, some of the changes with Facebook, the business pages aren't doing as well. So I'm really enjoying my Paleo Parents Facebook page. So anyway, let me introduce you, Kathy Enking. So Kathy and I have been doing a series of these. We try to go every Monday. It's been probably 3 weeks now, but we've been doing a series of these interviews and discussions, Facebook Lives together for, I don't know, probably a couple months now.
Yeah.
And they're really super fun. Kathy is a nutritional therapy practitioner from, Kathy, tell us really quick again, since this is a new audience, tell us about the Nutritional Therapy Association.
Yeah, so Nutritional Therapy Association is out of Olympia, Washington. And this program started back in the early 2000s. And our main focus really is on gut health. You know, we have found 5 foundations, and the first foundation really being digestion. So what we find is that digestion really is at the root cause of all diseases. And when you can really work on and heal digestion, a lot of other things resolve in your life. So that's in a nutshell. And reducing that inflammation in the gut is really key as well. So that's kind of in a nutshell. I'm also a nurse too. Have my BSN in nursing. So from college in Madison.
When and why did you make the transition from nursing to nutritional therapy?
Yeah, well, so here's the thing. I got into the nursing field and I thought, oh my goodness, there's all these sick people. And what I really want to do is be able to help people stay well. And what I really always believed at innately was that food is really our ultimate medicine. And I really noticed early on in my life, when I was a teenager, I was struggling with depression quite a bit. And what I really noticed that when I ate healthy, I felt better. When I ate junk and processed foods, it lowered my mood. And so I made that connection early on and really right away started incorporating healthier foods, more fresh foods into my life. And, I like a lot of us, I grew up in the 60s, a family with, a lot of convenience foods, a lot of processed foods that we were eating. And so I really flipped that around in my early teens and started eating a lot healthier. And so that's always really been at the forefront of my beliefs about health is nutrition. And so when I got disillusioned, with the medical system, with our corporate medicine, I decided to, and my kids had gotten older. I had been a stay-at-home mom, and kids had gotten older, and just decided I was going to go on and study my first love, which really was nutrition. So, and found this program, which was incredible, opened up a lot of doors for me. So, yeah.
And that program is associated with the Weston A. Price Foundation, correct?
We're not really, linked, in any kind of financial way, but what we really find is that a lot of the principles of Weston A. Price really are incorporated in a lot of what we teach. It's that foundational nutrition and really looking at ancestral, taking the best of what we knew before and the greatest of technology now and combining those together. And so that's really, there's no financial connection between us and Weston A. Price, but we use a lot of those principles, yes.
I just want to put ancestral health because so this is a kind of a perfect segue.
Yeah. I'm going to drink my tea. So.
Yeah. Okay. So let's get going on our topic today because, again, so this is my Paleo Parents web group. And, I do kind of discuss and part of the group mission is that we are sort of a Weston A. Price, ancestral health, real food movement. And, paleo is more all-encompassing than, sometimes people think. It isn't quite as strict as, a lot of maybe newer people or people who've read 1 or 2 books think paleo is a very broad diet. There were peoples that were eating a lot more roots and tubers, maybe more of a plant-based diet. There were people like the Inuit Indians that were eating primarily, at least in the winter, very few vegetables and a lot of animal fat and a lot of animal meats. So it really is a broad base. So to say paleo, you know, there's higher carb paleo, there's lower carb paleo, but basically it's a real food diet. And then if we look over sort of the history of humans, there's a lot of different ways to look at that as well. We can look at humans of 10,000 or 20,000 years ago, and we can also look at modern, unadulterated, untouched human groups that are still living in a traditional way. We also look at their diets because they have been untouched by modern civilization. So it's not just looking at foods of 10 and 20 and 30,000 years ago. We are pulling in knowledge that we have from the past 80 to 100 years, even 30 or 40 years, if there are peoples that, like I said, are untouched by civilization and eating a traditional diet. So really a traditional diet, an ancestral diet is sort of another way to talk about what we're about and sort of what we're going to talk about today. So what I want to get into today, it sounds like a kind of, esoteric, difficult to understand. We're going to try to make it really simple, but it's the gut-brain axis and how the way we eat affects that gut-brain axis. So since we just discussed that, I just did a little refresher on exactly how to explain the gut-brain axis. I'll get going. I'll go ahead and jump in and start with what the gut-brain axis is. So many of us are hearing a lot more recently that the gut, what we eat, affects how we feel mentally, emotionally, and that is just the very simple way to put it. But the reason why, so we'll get into that a little bit more deeper so that we can understand why food affects this so much, is that the brain speaks to the gut and the gut also speaks back to the brain. It's a bi-directional communication system, and it does so via the nervous system, the hormonal system, the endocrine system, our neurotransmitters, the immune system. So there's a lot of ways that they communicate back and forth. But one of the primary ways the gut talks to the brain is via our microbiota, our bugs, our microbiome in our gut, which is really newer science and really extremely fascinating. And it's just kind of been this new direction that I've been going in a lot lately with my focus on gut health, but focusing on the microbiome. And so what this microbiome does is it actually sends signals to the gut lining. It talks to the gut lining, but it also talks directly to the brain. So if our microbes in our gut aren't healthy, so they're either low in numbers or they're of the bad, leaning to the pathogenic side, we're going to have negative effects on the brain. The communication is going to be different. The neurotransmitters are going to be not the kind we want. We're not going to have the relaxing, mellowing, feel-good neurotransmitters. We're going to have more inflammation, and we're going to have, depression, anxiety, brain fog, insomnia, as well as all the mental disorders of the Alzheimer's, leading to dementia and Parkinson's and all that. So let's get into a little bit about how what we eat affects the microbiome and thus affects the gut-brain connection and communication. Can you speak to that a little bit, Kathy?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I go back to my story. My story is really that, here I was in my early teens and not really feeling great. I suffered with depression, even though it wasn't really anything that was diagnosed. I guess I'm kind of self-diagnosing myself looking back. But what I started to learn was that, again, when I ate the healthier foods, when I ate the fresh, raw foods, I felt so much better than when I was eating, hot dogs and Cheetos and things like that. So what we're really looking at doing is keeping that gut microbiota as healthy as possible. And the way that we do that is by, feeding the gut with, primarily healthy raw foods and foods in their natural form, foods that aren't processed. Because what happens is when we start feeding our guts with these processed foods, there's really no nutritional value there. And a lot of those processed foods, I'll call them, they don't add any value to that microbiota, and they actually inhibit the communication between the gut and the brain. And so what we're really looking at doing is eating foods that are in their raw, healthy state instead of in a box. And so I mean, that's really the essence of what I try to teach people, really at a foundational level. It's let's take a look at, the foods that you're eating. Let's take the unhealthy foods out. Let's bring in the healthy foods. And that's really the basis of where you want to start. I know we get into habits and patterns of just going to the grocery store and picking up the same kinds of foods that we always do. But if you can start making one or two slight changes in your family's, diet, that can go a long, long way. And that's really, that really is at the core, is that the gut and the brain are communicating. This is all new science. And so it makes sense to me that you want to keep that gut as healthy as possible. If you are feeding your gut, yourself, sugar-laden foods, processed foods, that's going to set up an inflammatory response within your gut throughout your body. And those cells aren't going to communicate anymore. That communication between the gut and the brain is going to be inhibited. And we're going to start, people start developing symptoms, even just slight pain, joint inflammation, things like that are all signals that something is going amiss in the gut. It's a good place.
Let's talk about kind of really back to basics. So the gut microbiome, what they basically eat are sugars, fibers, basically carbohydrates. Mm-hmm. And depending on the types of carbohydrates we give them, we are either feeding the bad bacteria or we're feeding the good bacteria, right?
Yeah.
So processed food. So we can say, there are some foods that, say a potato or even some grains might be okay if they're very unprocessed and they're fresh. They're straight out of the ground or off the plant and they're ground and they're fermented or, some of the ancestral ways of eating them. Whereas you can take those same products and highly process them, turn them into a cereal or potato flakes for mashed potatoes, or you turn them into highly processed. It changes the cellular structure so much in those cells of that plant that now they're going to feed the bugs in a bad way. They're going to feed the bad bugs. So in that way, keeping those foods whole, so again, closer to nature, closer to how they come out of the ground. But also there are a few foods that really just, no matter what you do to them, are going to feed bad bugs. And generally with the paleo diet, not always, I mean, in ancestral diet, they did generally, there's some theories that they ate some grains, they fermented them for a couple, 14 days. So there's definitely that sort of thought process or theory. So we definitely encompass all of that. So some grains, but just not to the extent that we're eating them today. Certainly not 3 times a week, a day. Highly processed wheat and gluten and all those. So generally, a lot of grains, a lot of starch, a lot of breads and pastas are going to feed the bad microbiome and going to lead to those inflammatory signals. Eating a lot of sugar, even eating too much fruit or processed fruit, into like gummies or fruit roll-up. That's going to feed some of the bad microbiome. So some of the good guys are going to be the things we just know. This is one of the reasons why we know kale and broccoli and some of those real fibrous foods are so good, because our gut bugs, our good guys, actually eat the fiber that we don't ingest. We can't metabolize that. That's their food. And so that is why you got to get your fiber. One of the reasons, but primarily, if you're talking about having good gut function, good bowel function, the reason is that your microbiome produce, the nutrients and the motility in your gut and the monitor, how things are talking and working and moving. So that's really the key, is feeding them that fiber. We're giving that to the gut bugs. We've lived with gut. We've evolved for hundreds of thousands of years with these bugs all over in our bodies, but primarily in our intestinal tract. They're essential. So eating those good veggies, to give them their fiber, kind of cutting back, like you said, on the processed foods, so we're not feeding the bad bugs. Let's talk a little bit about how do fats and proteins, are they problematic? Are they helpful? Where do we think they fall on all this? And let me just finish that. So, I know there's people that are very plant-based. There's some of us, I definitely believe we need to have a lot of plants in our diet, but I'm definitely a proponent of animal products in the diet. Certain amounts of meat. You don't need to eat a steak 3 times a day, but definitely we get things from animal products and animal proteins we can't get from anywhere else. But I do believe in a high, vegetable diet for the, this microbiome primarily.
Yes.
But is there going too far with meat and protein when it comes to gut microbiome, or what do you think about that?
Well, here it can be a very complicated issue. I mean, we try to make it simple for people, but here's the thing. I was just like thinking back about something that you said, is that, when we talk about ancestral nutrition, we are, especially in the United States here, we're just a melting pot. You can have, all people's backgrounds now are all mixed. And so, for instance, I have some European, I have some Scottish, and and some German, and the diets vary, from place to place. And so it's just that it's not a one size fits all for everybody, and that's what we're learning. So you do have to kind of find the foods that work for you, and you have to pay attention to make sure that, again, what works for one person doesn't work for another person. But when you're talking protein, I do believe in having animal sources of protein as well. I think we really need those. But the sources that we use for our protein, we want to make sure that they're as clean as possible. We don't want to be eating USDA beef that's been raised in a slaughterhouse, because that particular beef is going to be laden with, hormones, and they're fed an unnatural diet, which is a grains diet, and cows are supposed to eat grass. So you talk about, like, what that does is when you feed cows grain, soy, and corn, it sets up inflammatory response in their guts. And so the meat that comes from those unhealthy animals is going to have a huge amount of saturated fat in it. For one, it's not going to be the healthy balance between the saturated fat and the omegas, but you're going to have meat that actually promotes inflammation in your body. That's why it's so important to eat clean sources of meat. So whether that comes as, beef, lamb, pork, fish, chicken, poultry, whatever animal source, even if it's small amounts of dairy as well, that if you kind of look back at what your ancestors ate and take a look at that, the foods that kept them healthy, those, I think, are the animal proteins that we should incorporate into our own diets. And I've run into many people. It's like, I cannot eat a steak. And one thing I think is that we eat way too much muscle meat. We probably need to eat more of the organ meats, but a lot of people turn up their noses at that. I actually happen to really love liver and do try to incorporate organ meats into my diet so that I have a balance. So it's not just all steaks, or hamburger or whatever. But, again, try to eat a variety. And again, like you said, keeping, the primary source of the diet being plant-based, but then incorporating, certain amounts of animal nutrition into that and even almost protein more like a condiment. But again, depending, if you're a child, if you're growing, you might have more needs. If you're an athlete, you're going to have higher needs for protein. If you're somebody that lives fairly sedentary, then you may not have as high of a protein requirement. So there's so many different factors, and that's why it is helpful to have somebody that you can, run this. If you really are truly having some issues with your, in any fashion, you're having some kind of inflammation in your body that you're looking to resolve with other than medication, then you really got to start looking at diet, and it takes some time. This isn't overnight, take a pill and everything's cured. Your body took a while to get this way. It's going to take a while to start to make these small changes, baby steps, and incorporate some of this. But anyway, that was the long answer to proteins. But again, it's just not a straight answer with that. So, I try to look back to, my ancestral lineage and what were the foods that they ate, and then pay attention to any symptoms you might have following eating that particular food. If you get a headache, or you stomach ache, bloating or gas or anything following certain foods that you eat, you need to take a look at that and say, okay, well, is this food, serving me, or is it not?
Right. Yeah, so I think going back to the sources of protein, a couple of things I want to add to that is, like you said, the pesticide or the antibiotic, the toxin load in some of some of the CAFO, the industrial farm raised animals, is going to actually kill off the microbiome, so that's not going to be helpful at all. But generally, eating a very high quality animal protein is not going to do. It really doesn't feed the microbiome that much, but as long as it's a clean source, it's not going to upset the microbiome either. But adding to that protein from other sources, like you said, we in our country particularly exclusively feel that we or have culturally evolved to eat only muscle meat. And like you said, turn up our noses at everything else. The big problem with that is that we're actually overdoing the methionine and I'm not even sure I know methionine is a primary one in muscle meat. We're overdoing the methionine, and we're not getting a lot of the 24 other amino acids there that are coming from collagen, other organs, all the different parts of an animal that we should be eating, getting different. So bone broth, collagen, eating meat on the bones, we're getting a little bit of the collagen, the minerals from the bones, even some marrow. So varying that and keeping, necessarily not having a ginormous steak all the time, keeping some of the muscle meats down, but adding some of those others to the diet is also going to help heal the gut lining. So
I just, as a little segue too, that just reminded me when you're talking about the methionine, because I was reading in one of my books on cancer nutrition, was that, we're hearing a lot of information about red meat causes cancer. And I think what's happening, and what I saw somebody brought up, was that it's not red meat itself. It is just what you said. It's like an abundance of this methionine that is actually causing more inflammation and I don't want to say causes cancer, but it's a contributing factor, because you're right. We're not eating the collagen, the bones, the organs. We're not using the entire animal. We've just gotten into a habit of a big juicy steak. So yeah, it's a problem.
It pretty much all goes back to the microbiome. So we want to nourish that, and then we want to nourish and heal the gut lining, so that's where the bone broth comes in, and the collagen. It's very important in the lining of the gut, because it's kind of like a skin. It is a skin. It's an epithelial tissue, just like our skin and all of our lines from our nose and our mouth all the way down to the bottom. It's all sort of a skin type of a lining, and we all know collagen sort of helps with wrinkles. So it similarly helps to heal that gut lining, and then the microbiome can thrive on those veggies we add in there, and then we have the proper relationship and the proper signaling from that microbiome to the brain. So, for kids, let's say, I have a lot of people joining the Paleo parents because of kids' behavior or kids' health.
Yes.
And, for ADD, for, we could call it brain fog in adults. Certainly, I'm sure kids have some sort of brain fog as well. Behavioral disorders, anxiety, sleep issues, just removing those processed foods, because we're not feeding the bad bugs, is really, if we can simplify it in that way, it's kind of a cool way to really understand the deep reason why we need to get those, the graham crackers and the cereals and the highly processed foods out of the diet, so we don't feed the bad bugs, so those bad bugs don't give those bad messages to the brain. And then incorporating those proteins so that we can rebuild the gut lining, we can rebuild all the muscle tissue. And the other really important thing is healthy fats, because healthy fats are integral to all of our cells, all of our cell walls. If our cells are leaky, if our cells aren't well supported, and they're going to break down, and they're not going to support the gut. They're not going to support the microbiome. And we also need all those things in a meal. We need fats and the proper proteins to digest everything. Yes. So it really has to all kind of be there. One thing I want to sort of caution people on as we're talking about gut issues, we can go off in a completely different direction. People that have a lot of gut issues sometimes have a problem with too many vegetables. That is sort of an overall dysbiosis or imbalance in the microbiome, and ideally we want to get it back to balance so you can eat all those veggies again. So that is, what happens is that for other reasons, medication, stress, all that, our microbiome becomes imbalanced, and then we're feeding the bad guys too much, even with, some healthy vegetables. So that's, just to put a sort of a cautionary thing out there that some people might go, I just can't tolerate vegetables. They're telling me in my paleo diet to add veggie, I can't tolerate them. That is something you definitely need to work with a practitioner on, getting your microbiome back in balance so that you do tolerate those fibers again. So that's a really sort of important caveat. And, that can take years. There's people on SCD diets and GAP diets for 5-10 years. Maybe they can never put, say, sweet potatoes back in their diet. Those are things that are, sort of caveats that we want to, just sort of put out there, that there are people that need to work on their gut. It's a sign you need to work on your gut microbiome. But again, it all comes back to that microbiome.
Right. Well, and we have a tendency too with children is like to put out a plate of raw vegetables and some dip, and that's great for sure. But, what I try to tell my parents is that make sure there's a balance of the raw and some of the like cooked or steamed vegetables. And actually there was a period of time where I myself, I really didn't tolerate raw vegetables very well. And I went through a period of probably a good year or so where I don't want to say I didn't ever eat a salad, but what I did was I stuck with the smaller leafy greens, and then I lightly steamed a lot of my vegetables, and I found that they were so much easier to digest when they were slightly cooked. And so that can be really helpful for anybody who is like just getting all kinds of gas and bloating from eating all kinds of, raw and lots of kale and things like that. Kale is the one that, I never could tolerate kale. And so I always had to make sure if I had kale, I would always throw it in my soups because it would get cooked. And, I really enjoyed it. And soups is another thing. Like if you're looking for ways to get bone broth into your kids, you can hide that in just making really yummy, tasty chicken soup, with a few little veggies in there. And kids don't know the difference, that's what between that and like using some powdered soup broth. This is going to be so much more beneficial to your child's gut.
Right.
For sure. Yeah.
For kids, we can think about adding a little bit more wild rice. I even do some rice noodles. They just love it. It's a great way to get bone broth in.
Yeah, exactly.
Some interesting things in there, so they're not just drinking a mug of hot broth. They mind don't love that. Okay, so I think we've really touched on the primary things. Just kind of going back and recapping that gut-brain axis there. It's talking in both directions. Inflammation is a key. There's this whole theory that depression is actually an inflammatory process.
Yes.
And really where that comes from is what we're putting into our guts is getting, the messages are getting sent to the brain. The brain is also talking to the gut. So, if we're under stress, those stress hormones are going to affect the brain. The brain's going to tell the gut, to release, there's all sorts of hormones released in the gut too. So stress, we need to relax. We need to bring the cortisol down. All those things affect the microbiome in our gut. So, and then of course, adding in some fermented foods to help give them not only food, but that actually repopulates the microbiome with a variety from wild ferments. So that's another great way to up our, populations with.
That'd be another topic to talk about too, is how to get high probiotic and fermented foods into your kid's diet. That's, I never had those, but when I started incorporating fermented foods into just about every meal I eat, I try to put some kind of fermented food, not always, but it makes a difference. It makes a huge difference. I'll go like a week without eating fermented foods and be like, oh my God, what is going on? And then adding that in just helps so much to, just with digestion, overall digestion. Even if it's just drinking, I make my own homemade kombucha, even if it's just drinking my kombucha. It would be really helpful.
I think we need to definitely keep our fermented foods varied, because kombucha or kefir, if that's all you're doing, you're going to be getting a single or 2 or 3 strains of whatever biotics are making that ferment. So trying to vary that. I know it is a bit tricky with kids. I've done podcasts and a lot of stuff on this. Pickles are really the number one easiest way for kids.
Yeah.
Making sure they're
is another good one. Kefir, like you said.
Kefir, making sure the sugar's low, making sure kefir are generally, I direct people to kefir because yogurt sort of, you don't really know. It's not plain yogurt, normal yogurt on the store shelf is not generally fermented long enough. Kefir tends to be a safer bet.
Yeah.
But you know, if your kid is a little more adventurous, like my 12, almost 13-year-old, he'll do the gut shots. So it's like a liquid.
Yeah.
Like if you took a sauerkraut liquid, it's just like you're drinking it. So the pickles, they also have like fermented relishes and stuff like that. You can make your tuna or your sandwiches with that. And then a little bit of kombucha for the kids, a little bit of kefir for the kids. So keeping that rotating as well. And you don't need a lot. You really don't need, you know, a tablespoon or so. If you're eating every meal, tablespoon of sauerkraut, kimchi, something like that really goes a long way.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. People think they need to eat a lot of it, and really it's just a condiment. That's all it is. Yeah.
So yeah, let's just wrap this up with our favorite topic lately, you and I both, I think, is this microbiome, keeping it healthy. You know, if you've been on antibiotics, you know, definitely take some probiotics, get those fermented foods in, get your veggies in to a tolerable level, get the, you know, the pesticides and the medications and the pesticides and the GMOs and the non-organic foods are going to wipe out your microbiome. So we really want to be aware of what's wiping it out as well as how we're rebuilding it. So
right. And just as a little side note too, is that our, you know, I don't know what it is, 80-90% of our immune system is in our gut. So, you know, you're talking about trying to stay healthy with the cold and flu season. And if you have been on any kind of antibiotic for the flu or virus or whatever, it definitely, you've got to repopulate that with some good probiotics and also some, you know, good old fashioned fermented foods for sure. And that's going to keep that immune system healthy and functioning well. So
absolutely. Yeah, that is a really big thing when your child has been sick and you want to prevent the next one. We all think about vitamin C, you know, maybe vitamin D, but for sure that gut lining, that 80 to 90% of the immune system in the gut lining, we really, really need to get at minimum a probiotic pill or powder, you know, at best some of the other things we're talking about to just really fortify that microbiome. So love your bugs, take good care of them, and you know, we'll keep on this topic because I'm loving the microbiome topic because it's just huge right now.
It's super important. It's everything, really.
Yep. All right, so I'm going to put all of our links to how you can get hold of Kathy and I. I'm Katania Taylor from KataniaTaylor.com. Hopefully, if you're watching this, you're already part of Paleo Parents, but go over and check me out. My name is Katania Taylor. That's my business page. Kathy, do you have your business page up yet?
Yeah, it's up. Better World Nutrition. I'm working on it. But yeah, I've got some articles and things on there. So I want to start doing some Facebook Lives and start adding some more valued content to that page. So for sure.
Great. Well, you guys can get hold of Kathy at betterworldnutrition@gmail.com. You can get hold of me at KataniaTaylor.com.
You can also private message me on Kathy Enking, Kathy Mitchell Enking, my personal page, or my Better World Nutrition page too, through private messenger. I'm happy to do that as well. So.
Great. Yeah, we both work with patients one-on-one, clients one-on-one. We both work in clinics. So get hold of us and for sure put questions down below and we will get back to you and answer as many as we can. Thanks for being here. Thank you, Paleo Parents, for participating and making such a great group. And we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.
Thanks, Kathy, for being here. Bye, guys.
Bye.